Hi, everyone, and welcome to our second EDTalk event in this virtual series. My name is Amelia McCuskey, and I am with the Education Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us today for this virtual EDTalk on learning in crisis, district and school takeaways. We are so excited to bring you education leaders from both our own state and the national level. This is a very timely topic, and we're excited to hear from our speakers' experiences and look backs. A big thank you to our sponsors for this event, our gold level sponsor with Dow Inc. and our silver level sponsor, Bowles Rice. Thank you so much for making this EDTalk possible. Before we get started, I just want to mention a few housekeeping items. Each speaker will present for 10 minutes and there will be a 5-minute Q&A session after each speaker. We may not have time for every single question, but we will get to as many as we possibly can. If you think of a question for any of our three speakers while they are talking, please type it out in the chat feature. This can be found at the bottom of your screen with the speaking bubble labeled chat. Please click on that, type out your question, and then the moderator will ask your questions to each speaker. All attendees are on mute, and each speaker will be unmuted when it is their turn to speak. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our President and CEO, Dr. Amelia Quartz, to introduce our speakers. Amelia?
Thank you, Olivia, and thank everyone for joining us today for our second EDTalk offered by the Education Alliance. Last Tuesday, we had over 3,000 hits on our Zoom and Facebook accounts, and our EDTalk on broadband was a big success. I would encourage you to visit our website, and you can watch and also share those videos with those in your community. We are excited about the positive response today for this very important and timely EDTalk on learning in crisis, district and school takeaways. I'd like to thank our panelists for their leadership during this unprecedented time. Today, we're excited to hear from those that are really on the front lines, and we've asked each of our speakers to address 3 things in today's EDTalk. First, we've asked them to give us a look back, to give us an update on some of their innovative efforts to support student learning during the crisis. And we'll be hearing from both districts and also the teacher perspective. Second, we've asked them to give us a look ahead. What important takeaways or opportunities should we be focused on for the future? And thirdly, we've asked them to share a look at their students. You're going to hear today from 3 people that are truly passionate about serving students. All of our speakers also requested that we include some pictures in today's PowerPoint. So throughout each EDTalk, you'll be seeing pictures of real West Virginia students that were taken before the crisis, just to remind us of the real reason for today's EDTalk. With that, I'm pleased to introduce today's panelists. First, we will hear from Marshall County Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Shelby Haynes. Dr. Haynes has been a real leader implementing some innovative approaches, and so we're excited to hear from her and her lessons there as the district superintendent in Marshall County. Next, we'll hear from the 2020 West Virginia Teacher of the Year, Jennifer Swartfeger. Jennifer teaches science at Cameron High School, and I had the chance to visit Jennifer's human anatomy class earlier in the school year, and I can tell you that I was able to see firsthand why she is the State Teacher of the Year. So we're excited to hear from Jennifer. And thirdly, concluding today's EDTalks will be the superintendent of a school district called Lindsay Unified School District in California. Lindsay is a very rural school in California. It has a very high rate of poverty, and the superintendent of that district is Tom Rooney. Superintendent Rooney visited West Virginia in 2018 when he was the keynote for the Education Alliance's Education Summit. So we're excited to catch up with Superintendent Rooney today and learn from his experiences in his district. All three of our speaker bios are linked on our website, so you're welcome to visit there and learn more about them. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Shelby Haynes. Dr. Haynes?
Good morning. I must say that as I entered into the superintendent seat this year, it was quite a wild ride. I've spent many years in Marshall County schools in many different seats, and as my first year as superintendent, I hit the ground running, let's just say. So as I sit and look back at all that has gone on over the last 11 weeks, it's quite a whirlwind, to say the least. This all started 8 months into my tenure, thinking good superintendents don't make decisions on a hunch. But I did just that 8 months into my tenure of Marshall County Schools, and on a gut feeling called a 2-hour delay of all days on Friday the 13th to allow teachers some time to prepare if there was going to be a school closure due to COVID-19. Now, I have to admit that some of the superintendents in the Northern Panhandle heard from me that day asking, what are we going to do? Can we kind of do this, stick together? Because I knew that I was just going to take heat for this. I just kept thinking, what a slap in the face for teachers to get 2 measly hours to prepare for a school closure that may or may not happen. And we really don't know how long it might be for. But when the governor stated that we would not be returning to school that Monday, I must say that the teachers and principals rose to the occasion. I asked that each principal submit a remote learning plan for their school. We also submitted remote learning plans at the district level as well, so that here at the county office, how were we too going to work remotely, learn remotely? Those plans were to include staff professional development, as well as remote learning for students and packet learning for students. We were not sure of how many students in our county did not have internet access, but we knew it was pretty great. We know that we have a number of students who don't have landlines, let alone internet or cell phone service. We also knew that, we need to make sure that the community around us understands that we are still working, and we're still working very hard. I've had many, many teachers say to me, I wish we could come back to school. I am working harder doing this than I am at school. I have kids in front of me. So those remote learning plans contained a lot of professional development for our staff, as well as how we were going to connect with children with and without internet. So this all went down on a Friday, and on Sunday afternoon, the principals were told that they needed to submit their plans to me. And I have to, again, give them significant kudos, because without a complaint, without a him haul around, we had a meeting on Sunday and every single principal had their plan ready to roll for Monday. So we had that meeting Sunday afternoon. The principals submitted their plans. They worked all weekend to have these ready to me for our Sunday meeting. I was just absolutely amazed by the creativity and the work that had been put into these plans. And our remote teaching and learning began on Monday. The governor gave counties a week to prepare, but we didn't take it. We started on Monday. One of the things that was in all of those plans was connecting with your children. How can we connect with children in some way within the first week and a half, to know that our kids are okay, to know what resources our kids have so that we know how to plan. As this remote teaching and learning progressed, we held weekly meetings with principals asking that they continue to have professional learning community meetings with their teachers. And also, principals were asked to submit a list of students with whom they were unable to make contact. When we got those names from the principals went and maybe did distance home visits, phone calls. Myself or someone from the county office went to check on the kids, and we would take hard copies of packets of work and food to the homes. Another way that we looked for children that we had not heard from was during food distribution. We're a pretty small county. There's only about 4,000 students, but we fed about half of our student population every Wednesday during food distribution day. Somebody from the county office is at each bus stop each week. We send our food out on the buses, and there are bus drivers on those buses, but someone from the county office is also at each bus stop giving out the food. And we look for the students and families that the principals have told us that we're having difficulty finding. And at those food truck stops, we also give out additional work, books, and we also pick up completed packets from families. So that was one of our major concerns, is that we need to make sure that we've heard from all of our children. So again, as I look back, there's a lot of things that I'm very, very proud of in Marshall County, but I only have 10 minutes, so I had to narrow it down to 2. There are 2 things that we did in Marshall County that I'm very proud of. The first is that we continued individualized instruction, and this took a lot of work. We didn't buy special software. We used our greatest asset, and our greatest asset is our teachers and our instructional aides. The teachers know their children, and they know what these children need instructionally. The teachers know what they covered in the curriculum and what needed to be taught in the future. They knew who was struggling with which standards. They knew what needed remediated, what needed enriched. So those teachers continued to plan individualized instruction for our students. We knew that our kids needed that, and so we had teachers posting videos of instruction. They hosted Zoom meetings. They used Microsoft Teams for meetings. We had a lot of teachers who would have entire class instruction and videotape themselves, and then again, they would have private sessions for students, and parents might be on there, small group instruction for enrichment and remediation. In our county, we have Title I teachers. We also have some interventionists paid for through our levy. Those teachers continued to contact their children and their families and help parents learn how to do some of the reading strategies and math strategies that we do in small skills groups. In Marshall County, we are the 2nd highest county for neonatal abstinence syndrome childbirth. So we have a lot of children who are born addicted in our county. We have a lot of students who need contact with their school counselors. And we also have 2 social workers that work in our county. We had those counselors and social workers spent their time making contacts with kids that they saw every week, and almost took on the role of like a telemedicine to help make sure that these parents were getting the support that they needed during this time as well. One of the coolest things I thought was that our strings teachers, we have a ever-growing violin strings group in our county, and our strings teachers scheduled individual classes. So each kid was given a day and a time where they would have individual strings classes through video conferencing. And as this continued and we became more comfortable with some of the video conferencing software, they started having small groups strings classes. It was just amazing. Schools started setting up private social media accounts for instructional purposes so that students could watch videos on a parent's phone if need be. We decided to switch to some private accounts because we want to make sure that for the safety of our children. and also copyright law, things like that. But we found that while many people didn't have a computer or they didn't have internet, they did have some kind of cell phone service and could access social media. So many of the schools began private social media accounts where we would have to accept the parents or the children into that group and then do private lessons that way. We just were trying to figure out, when you have so many people who don't have internet service, what can we do to make sure that we're reaching every child? I was amazed at how it all came together. The individualization was not only based on student learning, but also on the access, on what access they had. So as we started to talk to individual people, and they would tell us, I have cell phone service, but I only have so many minutes a month I'm allowed to use, or so much data. I don't have a landline, I don't have internet service. And so we would adjust based on that individual child's needs. When we had some students who didn't have internet, teachers would upload instructional videos to a thumb drive. I know of a few teachers who did that. And then the families borrowed laptops from the school or county office, and the kids could watch those videos on the thumb drive. We also enabled hotspots in the parking lot of 5 different schools for people to pull up so that they could have internet access. We had a number of people access those, and we also had teachers making individual paper packets for children as they needed. We used the county office as a hub, and we left the man trap open for people to drop off things and pick up things as they needed, so that we could still have everybody safe, have a safe place to pick up and drop off. And to date, we've spent about $10,000 on postage, which is interesting. The other thing I'm very proud of is our special education services. We've continued to provide services for students on IEPs, individualized education plans, remotely. We've supported families with supplies they need to make it happen. Our related service providers, OT and PT, have done doorstop drop-offs of supplies so that kids can do with their parents gross and fine motor. We have used Zoom and FaceTime calls. Again, we found that our parents are very user-friendly with FaceTime on their iPhones, and so we've had many IEPs during that. We've actually increased our parent involvement in these IEP meetings, and many of my student teachers my teachers are saying that in the future, they will use that strategy to get parents involved in IEP meetings. One of the many other things that I look forward to is that many of our teachers have said that they have learned so many skills of technology through this. We have made transition meetings for kids with IEPs, videos of schools. I had a teacher who walked through the school and videoed a kid who's going to be going to middle school. Videoed, here's where you're going to get dropped off the bus. Here's where you check in. Here's your locker. Here's how you open your locker. And the kid can watch that all summer, his schedule to prepare for school. So I'm very impressed and proud of my teachers. I think that as I look forward, we will be integrating more technology into our instruction. We're going to be looking into more ways that we can download material into devices that can be sent home with kids who don't have internet, that could be synced up when they come back to school. I think that I see a lot of changes in instruction coming after we have mastered many of these technology skills. I look forward to the fall, and I truly feel that a time of remote learning will change what we do in the future in many ways. It's an exciting time.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Haynes, for that incredible update and all of the amazing achievements that Marshall County has made during this crisis despite all the difficulties. It was just incredible to hear, that you all have not only used social media and the Zoom video calls to your advantage, but you've actually increased parental involvement during this crisis, which I think is super important in order to keep kids involved and keep the students learning and moving forward throughout this crisis. We do have a couple questions for you. Our first, was there any concern on your part that you might lose community respect or credibility for telling people that you are still figuring out how to manage and navigate this crisis?
I think honesty is the best policy. And if anybody was to say to their community that they had it all figured out from the beginning, that would be untruthful. We don't know what this pandemic is going to bring us from day to day. And so we continued to update the community every week for about the first 6 weeks. I wrote a letter and entered it into the newspaper. I sent it to all of the professional and service staff on the listservs that we have. And I also put it on our website, because we need to just make sure that the community, the staff, and all of the employees all know what's going on and that we're on the same page. So we gave continued updates to say what we were doing. We also made sure that everybody knew that we wanted to first and foremost keep our children and employees safe. And that was giving every single person in Marshall County an option to work remotely or come into work, because we had some custodians or maintenance staff who said, no, I'd rather just come in. We used some precautions to make sure they were by themselves, those type of things. But everybody had the option. Everybody kept a log of what they were doing. And we also added those professional development opportunities. And that has really increased our skills with technology, and also our understanding of trauma. We focused on technology and trauma-informed classrooms through all of those.
Great, that's incredible. Thank you. Our last question of the day for Dr. Haynes is, how do you feel about working in required virtual learning days each year in the future so that both teachers and students, as well as parents, are prepared in the event that we have another situation like the COVID-19 health crisis?
I think it's something that has to be considered because of the day and age that we live in. Also, when you go to college and different things, you know, you work remotely, you take classes remotely. There's a lot of jobs that are remote. The problem is that we have to make sure that our parents are supported. You know, we have had a lot of parents who have been real troopers through all this, who are trying to work from home, teach their children, and maintain a household. And so we have to make sure that too much of this burden isn't strapped on our communities and parents. So I think we need to watch to see, as the communities open, if people are back to work or if they're still working remotely, so that we have a balance that meets everyone's needs and keeps our children safe and our staff safe.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. We truly appreciate not only sharing with us today the innovative approaches that you've implemented as you shared in your first year here as a superintendent, but really all of the efforts that you highlighted, the endless hours of yourself and your teachers and your principals, and just sharing with us some of those strategies that the strings teacher and the special needs teachers and all of the teachers have implemented to help their students succeed. So thank you again for your time and your insight today. At this time, I'm pleased to introduce our second speaker. We'll be hearing from the 2020 West Virginia Teacher of the Year, Jennifer Swartzfager. Jennifer?
Good morning. I would like to start by thanking the Education Alliance for sponsoring this event, and thank my fellow participants, Dr. Shelby Haynes and Superintendent Rooney. I would like to offer my insights from a teacher perspective from this pandemic event. It's been quite an educational opportunity for all of us. So looking back, some issues that have been brought to the forefront, some teacher takeaways. The thing that has impressed and amazed me, I think, the most is that how at all levels, from state leadership down to our school building personnel, districts across our country have united to serve students on all fronts. All individuals involved have been true heroes and true community servants. And I just think that's been a wonderful thing to see. I also want to thank our educational leadership in our state. Superintendent Birch and all of our county superintendents have really been doing an amazing job keeping us updated and informed. and just connected with each other. So we're all doing the very best we can do to serve all of our students. Our teacher, our service personnel, and our administration have just worked together seamlessly, balancing it all, balancing not only the academics, but the social, emotional, and physical needs of our students, as well as ourselves, keeping ourselves healthy mentally and physically. And it's been really impressive also to see teachers working beyond their job descriptions, trying to learn very quickly new modalities and methods of lesson delivery and also assessment, while trying to stay one step ahead day to day to be prepared. And that's a really difficult thing to do. It's difficult to maintain that in the classroom, but to do it virtually is a completely different story. And again, like I said, this has been a real mental and physical challenge, I think, for everyone involved. I think we were all in panic mode during the first few weeks, facing the unknown, not only what was going to happen with school, but just healthcare in general and society in general. So because of that leadership that we had, it really helped the situation for all of us. And teachers have just been amazing, doing a complete pivot from their day-to-day routines, making a 180-degree turn just on a dime to transform their practice, and how they've taken it upon themselves just to really step up to meet the challenge has been just quite a feat. So another issue I wanted to talk about and reflect upon is just teachers and schools working with families and students during this time, how important that is. I think the priority is and will continue to be, it must continue to be, students first, building and maintaining that student and family relationship first. And establishing and maintaining contact has been made and kept a priority during this time, just to prevent feelings of isolation. And keeping lines of communication open to maintain those personal relationships is just a must. I know that myself and my fellow teachers have made countless phone calls, emails, text messages. We've sent cards and sent letters, including all the online learning platforms as well, just to maintain that communication, just to reach out to say, how are you? How are you doing? Do you need anything? Is there anything I can do or we can do to help you? Please let us know. And I just think that's the center part of it all, to hold us all together. This situation has also exposed inequities on a huge, larger scale. And I think, we've come face to face with data that we talk about all the time and have talked about over the years. We've realized now that people are not just numbers. In times of crisis like this, it becomes real. And when those relationships that have been built and maintained really have to be dealt with, it's in our face, and we have to figure out what we're going to be doing with it. I think from that situation, we've gained a much broader understanding that not all students and families have equal access to learning at home. And we have provided paper packet options for those who do not have broadband internet access. And we worked with our students and families and teachers as a team to establish dates for pickup and drop off, like Superintendent Haynes described, and it has worked very well, I believe. It's also important, while we talk about that, to think about and consider our students and the needs of those students who are homeless, living with family members or friends, those who are in foster cares and in shelters. We cannot forget them, and to make sure that they remain on our priority list also. And I think we have done that. We have reached out to them as well. And like Dr. Haynes also mentioned, considering how to reach students with special needs. I believe we've come up with innovative ways to do that. Dr. Haynes mentioned IEP meetings and improving parent involvement in that. Also thinking about our students who are not English language learners. And, utilizing the materials we already had in place and adapting those, but also looking at new ways to address our English language learners. It's still a hurdle to overcome, and I think we're still learning from that, but that was another need, maybe a missing item that has been brought to the forefront also. Last week, the discussion we had was the broadband internet connectivity and access to devices. And it was very reassuring as a teacher to know that there are groups of individuals, businesses, and politicians and community members involved in improving that situation. We have to get that infrastructure in place to overcome that issue. And I think that the limited engagement because of those issues has caused increased stress on students and families. And thankfully, those involved are familiar enough with cell phone and cell phone service and connectivity to help overcome some of that. Next, we need to remember what learning looks like at different grade levels and from different perspectives. And what I do as a high school teacher is very different than what an elementary school teacher or a pre-K teacher or even a college or university professor would do. So it's difficult sometimes to keep that all in balance, but to remember that we all have different perspectives on the situation and that we all need to work together as teachers, as a teaching team, to keep everybody involved and balanced. We have to listen to student and family voices, again, asking them what they need to make things easier, to deal with their own stress. And from a personal standpoint, not just parents and students, but teachers have also faced similar issues. I live in a very rural area. My internet connectivity is very limited and unreliable under normal day-to-day circumstances and conditions. And now it seems so much worse. I recently found out that I'm paying for internet service that I'm not truly receiving. So it's a problem. I'm also facing my own lack of technology experience. I am so thankful for all the webinars and virtual classes that have been made available and free of charge for teachers to update our skills. And I have enjoyed so much the teacher-to collaboration because it's helped me realize that I'm not alone in this situation. And that has been really a positive joy that has come out of this for me personally. I'm concerned about students who have not been engaged. I think that social media and mainstream media at the beginning, so much early on, was just overload. And I'm afraid that some were checked out, but it was, for me personally, some did check back in as we progressed through that. I think some students may have been avoiding some work or check-in because of feeling overwhelmed or really learning maybe for the first time what it's like how to manage self-directed learning or manage their time. So from that, hopefully they have grown as well. We also need to realize that not every student's home life is optimum, and we must continue to address their social and emotional learning needs as we start to return to the classrooms. Always keeping that in mind, in the back of our minds as we move forward. Personally, an issue for me has been a lack of visual student feedback. I really miss those visual nonverbal clues. And it's difficult when you're looking at a paper packet or when I receive an online response to my online class forum. It's really hard for me to determine where that student is in their progress at that particular point in time. I really miss that face-to-face contact. It makes a huge difference in the teaching practice, especially with assessment and those ongoing moment-to-moment assessments that we make. So I think students, in a way, are also missing out on their collaboration, their group work, their discovery and problem solvings, and their basic social interaction skills. It is still happening, thankfully. It's just different in a virtual learning situation. But at least we have some of that still continuing. But I definitely look forward to getting back to that also. Up front and in the beginning, I think as teachers, we were very concerned about how we're going to handle our grading. How are we going to assess their work? But I'm so thankful that we have focused on quality and progress, not on quantity of completion. And I think at this particular point in time, that has been very, very important, just because of everything that I've previously mentioned, all previous concerns. That was the best answer at this particular time. So I think moving forward, considering our seniors, I read recently where FAFSA, the applications this year have decreased, and that was a concern. I'm also thinking about our first generation college students and our rising college freshmen. They are already experiencing a massive amount of anxiety as they start to face new experiences and independence, and now it just seems compounded with unknown plans. And until they kind of figure out until they wait for colleges and universities to figure out how that their own reentry will look like for their campuses. So hopefully this will be a positive learning experience for them. And I think about our first year teachers and our student teachers. What have they been going through and what have they learned and gained from the experience? I recently spoke with a science teacher in West Virginia. I had the privilege of meeting her actually in a Zoom meeting. She just started in January, and it was very reflective to see, you know, how far she has come and what she has gained from the experience. And she definitely has a lot to contribute. Also, I think moving forward, we have to be very optimistic. We have to take everything we have learned, like Dr. Haynes has said, and apply it. This has been a huge learning opportunity for all of our society, and it will have major historical impact. I'm really a true believer in thinking that the situation has shined a light on all educational professionals, and they have shown us to be vital players in society, where we have a huge impact in the role that we play. I believe teacher voices have been elevated, and I hope they've been heard by policymakers. I hope that this helps to direct funding to areas of need in public education. And I certainly hope our young people will be inspired to consider teaching as a profession, just because of the impact that they can certainly have. I think things will be very positive moving forward, like I said, as we consider what school will really look like, modifications we will need to make, and how we will be addressing possible student learning gaps. And I think with everyone working together as a team, it will be a smooth as possible transition back into the classroom. I'm very pleased with the strengthening that's taking place and partnerships between students and teachers and administrators and families. It's definitely a bonding, I feel, that has taken place, and that has been a very positive thing. And we must still, again, continue to incorporate that social and emotional factors of learning as we move forward. So finally, I just want to end by saying this pandemic, as scary and as terrible as it has been, has given us an opportunity to really think about and redesign what education looks like locally and at the national level, and how, as that team, family team, we can move forward with the goal of keeping individualized learning at the forefront and addressing needs of all of our students from this point. So I just want us to say thank you again, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We truly appreciate your incredible insight as a teacher throughout this crisis. Our first question for you is, you talked about the importance of relationships. How do you balance the need to teach academically with your social economic responsibilities?
I've always, when I started my teaching career, I learned early on that building that relationship first is an absolute must. You can talk about all the science content you want to talk about. Until you address that student as a person, meet them as a person, and show them respect as a person and as an individual, it's all for nothing. Once that that relationship is established and maintained, then that's when the real learning takes place, because it's a one-to-one constant feedback relationship. And it is a balance. You can't just do it once and then move on. It's a day-to-day interaction. And that it's been very difficult to maintain that in this virtual learning situation, just because of the feedback issues that I discussed. But I think as teachers, we have all gained knowledge from this experience, and hopefully we will all continue to apply that as we head back to the classrooms to keep building that one-on-one connection with our students.
Great, thank you so much. Our last question for Jennifer is, as a science teacher, you teach high school students. Was there anything your students said that was most helpful with keeping them engaged in learning throughout this remote learning situation?
Anything that they said. I think I was most impressed by their interest in continue learning. I honestly can say, if I were in their shoes as a high school student, I would have found it very difficult to maintain the level of interest and motivation that most of my students have. So I think what they have said, it's not so much what they have said, it has been what they have done. Their level of participation, their level of interest has really impressed me. I keep thinking to myself, would I really have done that, or would I just kind of done the bare minimum, you know? But I can honestly say most of mine have not done the bare minimum. And the quality of work that I have received back just blows me away, really. And I've still done my best to maintain feedback. I've tried to give personal feedback to every piece of work that I have received. I haven't done that 100%, but I've certainly tried just to maintain that. And it's been difficult and quite time consuming, but I think that has helped the situation also. So that the self-motivation has been, you know, pretty darn good.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer, for your powerful Ed Talk and really sharing the teacher's perspective, for reminding us that it is about keeping students first and that we do need an optimistic outlook and approach as we move forward. At this time, I'm pleased to introduce our third and final Ed Talk speaker, Superintendent Tom Rooney. Tom?
Good morning, and I am honored to be here with all of you virtually, and I'm also honored to share this virtual stage with Dr. Haynes and Ms. Schwarzenegger, the 2020 West Virginia Teacher of the Year. So I would like to say that in listening to their sharing over the last 40 minutes or so, it really is obvious to me that great things are happening in the state of West Virginia in this response to this COVID-19 pandemic. So congratulations to those of you and the work that you're doing to continue the learning opportunities for the children you serve. So in a little quick background on the demographics of Lindsay is a preschool through 12th grade rural district with over 4,100 learners. 100% of our learners receive free and reduced lunch. Over 50% of them come to school speaking a language other than English, typically Spanish. 13% of our children meet the federal definition of homelessness, and the average education level of the adults in our community is the 5th grade. So with all of these challenges and demographics, you could simply imagine the parents in Lindsay and how much they truly rely upon the school system to support their children and to support and work with them as we provide a path for their children out of poverty. So in Lindsay, when the COVID-19 crisis began to impact our area, we were kind of both simultaneously planning on the closing of our facilities while we were also planning for the continuation of learning. See, we closed our facilities, our physical buildings, on March 17th, and we opened up for learning literally on March 18th. And as a community, we had been building a personalized, competency-based, learner-centered system for nearly a decade. So Lindsay was in some ways more prepared than many districts who were going through this transition. For instance, before this happened, we already had one-to-one devices for every learner. We already had established a district-sponsored and district-funded community Wi-Fi system that ensured connectivity for every learner and every parent. We have already built a robust learner management system that literally housed thousands of units of study at in every content area and for every grade level. And so, however, even though we had those pieces in place, they were never leveraged the way that they were required to be leveraged in this time of COVID-19. And even more importantly than all of those things, and this is something that any community can do, the most important thing in the work of transformation is transforming the mind of a child of poverty, creating in each of them a growth mindset, a mindset of personal and collective responsibility and investment in their life. You see, in Lindsay, whether learners are 5 years old, 10 years old, 17 years old, or anything in between, we have built a system where they take true ownership and investment in their learning, in their future, and in their life, regardless of the circumstances they live on a day-to-day basis. We have taught them to actively set personal and personal goals and learning goals, and we've taught them how to track their own progress towards proficiency. You see, in Lindsay, when COVID-19 came along, we never closed the schools. We just closed the facilities and remained open for learning, for love, and for service. The first work after the closing of facilities was, as you've heard both speakers mention earlier, was the connecting with our learners. And connecting with our learners and our families and letting them know that we are still here. Because just like many of the children and the families in West Virginia, the schools are the safe haven from trauma, from neglect, and sometimes from the abuse that happens in the home. The school system is a place where children go to get away from some of the struggles in life. And when the children see that the schools are closed, it just exacerbates that level of trauma they may experience. And so we have to be, as you do, that source of support for some of our learners, because for some of our learners, we are the only support that they have. And so in Lindsay and in West Virginia, they need to know that we have never left them, that we are still here for them. A quick story something that we realized a week or so after our facilities closure was that many of our learners did not have the basic supplies in their home to support them in their learning. While they might have had a device, a computer or some type of device, they had access to the Lindsay teaching staff and other staff. Many of them didn't have pencils, pens, markers, paper, the very basic supplies that are needed in learning. So the Lindsay team organized an effort to have basics learning supply packets mailed directly to each learner. We work with Office Depot, and each learner received their own packet in the mail, and it was addressed directly to them. And the stories of joy and appreciation were absolutely amazing as learners actually got mail that was addressed to them, and then to find that it was the essential materials they needed for this new learning journey. The parents and learners were thankful, but one particular parent went out of her way to videotape a message to express how she wanted to express a message of thanksgiving. With tears in her eyes and through her broken English and with deep sincerity, she expressed how she wanted to help her children and wanted them to be successful. But getting the school supplies was simply not possible economically or because of the closure. So when the packets arrived in the mail and her children opened them, it was like Christmas in the middle of a crisis. A powerful message of a parent who knew that we had never given up on her and never left her or her children. Another early and ongoing part of our COVID journey was to prepare our teaching staff to teach effectively in this remote setting. Within 4 days of our facility closure, we offered a full-day virtual professional learning opportunity, and we had over 28 different breakout sessions. And since that time, mid-March, we have offered additional optional training sessions every Saturday and have 3 to 4 hours per week that are all about how to teach in this new environment. Part of our commitment and part of your commitment has to be about helping the adults, particularly the teaching staff, helping them to develop the competence and the confidence to teach in this new modality. We've found that some of our very best teaching learning facilitators, which we refer to our teachers as learning facilitators, we found that some of them struggled in this and needed support. Our lessons have been so important and something for you to consider. Support your adults, support your teaching staff, support your principals, and support your parents. As you heard Superintendent Haynes say earlier, our parents now are at home with a house full of children who are trying to learn. They now play a new role in their learning. So what we've adopted in Lindsay is we've adopted a mindset of give grace to all because they are learning just like we are. They are learning how to be vulnerable and how to be learners themselves. And for each of us who are in leadership, I have a nudge for each of you and for each of us. We are in positions of influence. And whether you are listening to this and you work in a school system, whether you are in the legislative world, the business community, the healthcare industry, social services, or the broader system of support and advocacy for school and for children, we all need to realize that the future of education has changed forever. The future of learning for children and adults has been advanced because of this terrible crisis. And now is the time for the leaders at every level of our state, of our communities, in our nation to embrace what it means to be uncompromisingly learner-centered, making every decision based on what is best for the needs of the children we serve. It will require the very best of us. Consider how we will use the lessons of this crisis to transform the learning opportunities for the future. That will include how we will use technology, how will we enroll our parents as the first and most important educators of their children, how we will support our teaching staff to use blended approach to learning, one that includes both face-to-face and virtual learning opportunities. A future of learning that enrolls the community to partner with the schools and embrace our collective responsibility to educate the learners of our communities. And while we do not know what the future will bring, we are planning in Lindsay, and I know you are too. We are planning for opening learning in the fall. And whether that's virtual, face-to-face, or some blend of both, we are committed to providing the ideal learning experience for each of our learners. If you can flip to the pictures that I had sent, if those are not up yet, there they are. Look at these faces. These are the faces of a couple of West Virginia learners. These are the faces that represent the thousands of learners that are counting on you to figure this out. It is time for each of us to deliver on our promise to these children, our promise in our roles as leaders. Give them what they need so that they will advance in life and be successful citizens of your state. Remember the faces of West Virginia's children and the faces of the parents that need you in this time. They need you to support them. This is what this journey is about as a leader. This is what the journey is about more than ever before. And I will close with something that you might remember as the 5 C's during the COVID-19. The first C is community. And while many of us are in isolation, many people are in isolation or in quarantine, this is now the time for building and strengthening community, building and supporting and sustaining a learner-centered community. This is also about working collaboratively at every level of every organization and throughout our communities to create the ideal learning experience and being responsive to the needs of the children of West Virginia. You will act, and what will be required of you is to act with creativity to solve problems that you may not be equipped to solve. How will you get internet connectivity to every learner? I don't know. How will you get a device in the hands of every learner? How will you guarantee learning every single day? How will your grading practices work? How will your staff be developed? You have to be creative in figuring that out. And will each of us as leaders find the courage to do what is right for our learners, no matter what? And finally, are we deeply committed to never, ever giving up on any child or any parent or anyone who needs you now, who needs your leadership now? In Lindsay, our equity commitment is that we want every Lindsay learner to leave our system with a deep belief and an actual proclamation that says, you gave me what I needed when I needed it. Will the children of West Virginia look back at this time and look back at each of you in leadership roles and say, you gave me what I needed when I needed it. Thank you.
Superintendent Rooney, thank you so much for those incredibly powerful stories. We truly appreciate your insight. Our first question for you is, how do you support your English learners, especially those families that do not speak English at all?
That is an excellent question. And the support for English learners is very similar to the support for English learners when we were face-to-face. And the reason is because we know that in order to support English learners, we provide language scaffolds, we provide visuals, we meet them where they are in their language development. We provide them with opportunities to practice their language. We have them set goals around what words they're going to read, what levels they're going to get to in their language development. And we provide them with those opportunities. And we even put them in sometimes into programs that are specifically designed, computer programs that are designed to advance their language skills. And so we did all of that when they were here, when they were face-to-face with us. Now we do that virtually, sometimes with a videotaped lesson that they looked at, but sometimes with the face-to-face, one-on-one, or face-to-face small group language practice. What we found is some of our English learners who were sometimes most quiet in a physical setting have actually blossomed in this virtual setting. For whatever reason, some of the barriers or the insecurities that might have faced them because they were worried about not fitting in, some of them now are actually blooming because they're in their home environment and they're being connected to virtually and feel more successful. Hope that's helpful.
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you so much. Our last question for you, Superintendent Rooney, is that you mentioned it is important to support the adults through this time. Can you talk about some of your strategies that you use to get parents active and participating in their child's education?
Yeah, so one of an essential strategy is to make personal connections with those parents. And so one of the things that we do is our learners, when we're zooming into the home through Zoom or through some other form, is the learning facilitator or teacher can literally say, get your mom on the phone, get your dad on here, and let me see them, let me talk with them, let me ask with them, let me interact with them. And so that's a way that often didn't happen. We're finding that many of our learning facilitators and our principals and our counselors and our classified staff members are reaching out to and connecting with our parents in a more effective way than they had in the past, because sometimes it was very difficult for parents to come to the learning environment or come to the school for transportation reasons or for insecurity reasons or for whatever the reasons might be. And for them to connect virtually sometimes is easier. And when you're face-to-face with the learner and the learner walks over and gives the computer to the mom and says, hey mom, the teacher wants to talk to you, it changes what's possible. You heard Dr. Haynes mention that the services for learners who are on IEPs. We've conducted over 65 individualized learning plans virtually, and what we have found is our parents are more engaged in the IEPs than they were when we were face-to-face.
Thank you again, Superintendent Rooney, for your incredible insight and for reminding us and to have our students take ownership of their learning, and for asking our leaders to embrace a learner-centered approach with our students and with our schools. We really appreciate you, and I loved what you said that Lindsay Unified School District never closed the schools, only the facilities. I think that's an incredible way to embrace this change. Thank you again for joining us today.
You're absolutely welcome. Keep up the great work in West Virginia.
Thank you so much. And thank you all so much for tuning in to our Ed Talk today on Learning in Crisis, District and School Level Takeaways.